Many consider energy to be the lifeblood of an economy. And if that's the case, then right now Europe is bleeding to death. What's up, guys? I'm nobody special. And right now, the combination of the Russian gas embargo, droughts affecting hydroelectric output, no wind power, and nuclear shutdowns in France are combining to form this perfect storm in energy markets in Europe. And if Europe isn't careful, you're going to see in some of these numbers, this could very quickly morph into a banking crisis that brings down the whole global financial system. And no, this is not just more doom and gloom from Jack. This is not hyperbole, folks. The numbers line up. And with that, we're going to shrink my big melon of a head. Check this out in Bloomberg, just dated today. Europe's energy crisis risks dwarfing $279 billion rescue cash. Programs to ease energy costs are failing to rein in demand. The approach is putting out a fire with gasoline, experts say. That's one analogy you could use. The way I like to look at it is Europe is already starving to death, and they're saying, no problem, we're just going to go on a diet. It doesn't work that way, folks. You need more supply. Reading in this article, Europe's politicians have already earmarked about 280 billion euros to ease the pain of surging energy prices for businesses and consumers, but the aid risks being dwarfed by the scale of the crisis. And that is an understatement right there. People have no idea of the scale of this crisis, probably because Europe has price controls on retail energy prices, and the end consumer never actually sees the true cost. It's not until you notice that one by one Europe's utilities are starting to go bankrupt that you realize just how deep this problem goes. With Russia squeezing gas deliveries and power plant outages further sapping supply, wholesale energy prices have soared to more than 10 times their seasonal average over the past 5 years. 10 times their seasonal average. Think about your electricity bill and your natural gas bill. If they were to increase 10x, do you think you'd have trouble making ends meet? Oh yeah, that might actually cause some problems. Tensions have intensified as Moscow prepares to shut the key Nord Stream pipeline on Wednesday for maintenance, reviving concerns about a long-term halt that would threaten efforts to secure sufficient reserves for winter. Now look, that phrase, sufficient reserves for winter, that is an understatement, because when we hear about, oh, the storage tanks are nearly full or the storage tanks are at the same level they were last year, well, remember, last year they had full flow through the pipelines. They won't have that this year. Those storage tanks being full means nothing if you don't have flow through the pipelines, because without the flow through the pipelines, the storage tanks won't be enough to meet demand. Governments across the continent have focused efforts mainly on lowering energy bills, an approach that may not only be overwhelmed by the price surge, but risks making the crisis worse. Programs like a tax cut on gas in Germany and a heating subsidy in Poland without restrictions for income levels or energy efficiency are more likely to prop up demand rather than rein it in. As they say, the solution to shortages is higher prices. Well, if the government doesn't let the prices rise to the market rate, well, then people are not going to be discouraged from using more, and so the shortages will persist. And what does that look like right now? Well, check this out from Javier Blas over at Bloomberg. He says fresh record highs for German and French electricity. German one-year forward prices, 725 euros per megawatt hour. Keep in mind, right now, the euro is basically at parity with the dollar. So $725 per megawatt hour in Germany, and France, 870 euros per megawatt hour. The 2010 to 2020 average was around 41 euros per megawatt hour. So we're talking 15 to 20x the historical average price for electricity right now in Germany and in France. You cannot run a modern economy at energy prices this high. At this rate, within a couple of years, Europe will be a third world continent. That is not an exaggeration, folks. Without energy, everything stops. And I want to just put that in perspective for you. Look at here, 725 euros per megawatt hour, 870 euros per megawatt hour. Remember, the euro and the dollar are at parity. Right now, where I live in Pennsylvania, this is the price of wholesale electric in the Penn Jersey, Maryland electrical grid, $91 per megawatt hour. So we are trading at 1/7, 1/8, even 1/10 of the rate of power over in Europe. And right now, power prices are elevated. We're in the summer cooling season right now. Everybody's got their AC cranked way up because it's hot out. So these are peak power prices here in Pennsylvania, and even those just absolutely pale in comparison to what Europe is looking at. Now, why do I say this is going to turn into a banking crisis? Because right now it's an energy crisis. The reason is that these numbers have just gotten so big. Now, in Europe, they have price controls on power. The government decides what the utilities can charge retail customers. So the end user has not really seen the big price spike yet. Prices have gone up, and they are struggling to make those bills, but the prices have not gone up nearly as much as the generation costs borne by the utilities has gone up. So the utilities are burning through their cash to provide power at a loss to the retail consumers. That only works as long as those utilities have more cash to burn through. And as we saw last month with the German utility Uniper going bankrupt and with French utility EDF being nationalized, one by one, these utilities are failing. They don't have the money to keep operating at such a loss. Well, when utilities go bankrupt, who's left holding the bag? Well, the banks that loan them the money. And that's when this turns from an energy crisis into a banking crisis, much the same way in 2008, the U.S. housing market, when that crash morphed into a financial crisis because so many people stopped paying the mortgages. It was the banks and the bonds that were left holding the bag for all those mortgage payments that weren't being made. Well, right now, the cost to generate electricity and the cost of these utility bills is approaching mortgage payment levels. If the actual cost to deliver electricity and to deliver heat to homes in Europe is approaching $2,000 or $3,000 a month, and nobody is paying that bill because the utilities are going bankrupt and the banks are having to eat that, well, guess what, folks? That's even bigger than people not paying their mortgages. Now, keep in mind, in 2008, when Lehman Brothers failed, the rate of delinquent mortgages in the United States was around 5%. Roughly 5 out of every 100 mortgages in the United States was severely behind on their payments. And back then, the average principal and interest payment on the average mortgage was about $1,400. So 5% of people not paying their $1,400 a month mortgage principal and interest was enough to collapse the U.S. banking system. What do you think is going to happen when everybody in Europe is being forced to pay almost 3,000 euros a month for gas and electric? Do you think the European banking system is in such good shape that they could withstand a hit like that? Absolutely not. If something doesn't budge, if these prices don't come down big time, and I mean big time, then Europe is absolutely looking at an energy crisis morphing into a financial crisis this winter. The numbers are just too big. They don't have the cash. Now, of course, that's probably not what's going to happen because, as the expression goes, to a hammer, everything looks like nails. And remember, Keynesian economists are in charge in Europe and modern monetary theory rules in Europe. So to them, everything looks like a problem that can be solved with the money printer. Enter Christine Lagarde and the ECB. They're going to try to print their way out of this crisis. They're going to try to dump euros on the open market to give people extra money to pay their utility bills or to bail out the European banks who can't alone eat the cost of all these utilities going bankrupt. Of course, that won't do anything to alleviate the energy shortages because you cannot print energy, but Europe's leaders still haven't figured that out yet. But it looks like the Forex market knows that's what's coming because look at the value of the euro against the dollar. Starting about 2 years ago where it was over $1.20, now it's down below the value of a dollar at about 99.6 cents. The euro is shedding its value because people are dumping their euros right now. They know the European Central Bank is going to try to print their way out of this energy crisis, much the same way they're trying to print their way out of the sovereign debt crisis that's emerging in the periphery countries like Italy and Spain. Printing money to solve your problems doesn't solve your problems. It just creates new problems, i.e. inflation. And Europe is facing runaway inflation come winter. But of course, the statists and the Keynesian economists who run things in Europe have one last trick up their sleeve, and that is inflicting untold hardship on their own people. Don't put it past them, folks. Listen to French President Emmanuel Macron, what he's talking about, the end of abundance. Listen to this one, folks.
What we are living through is a time of great upheaval. Firstly, because we are witnessing, and not just since this summer, but over the past few years, the end of what we might have seen as abundance. And for those who enjoyed it, it is also the end of a carefree time. Our freedom, the liberty to which we have grown accustomed to in our lives, has a price, and sometimes when we have to defend it, we have to make certain sacrifices as we fight to defend it.
The end of abundance and the end of a carefree life. And we all need to make sacrifices. Don't you just love it when people who have no intention of making any sacrifices themselves lecture you and I about sacrifices we need to make? Now keep in mind what Emmanuel Macron is talking about here when he says the end of what some consider to be abundance. What he's talking about is the availability of affordable food and energy, and God willing, a little bit of money left over at the end of the month to enjoy a little quality of life, or maybe even invest it in a better life down the road for you and your family. If I could put Emmanuel Macron's little statement here into more relatable words, what he's telling you is get ready because life is about to suck for everybody on the continent. They're going to inflict miserable austerity measures on everyday people in Europe. They're going to tell you how cold your house has to be or how hot your house has to be in the summer. They're going to tell you how much gas you're allowed to consume. They're going to cut off power supplies to businesses. They are going to shut everything down. You have to make those sacrifices. We all know Emmanuel Macron is not going to take cold showers or eat bugs or, God forbid, fly commercial when he goes over to Davos to knob hobs with the global elitists at the FEW backwards. I have to say it that way, FEW backwards, because every time I mention a certain global organization, bad things happen to my YouTube channel. So long story short, folks, what's going on in Europe, this energy crisis, could very rapidly descend into a banking crisis if things don't change, as utilities go bankrupt and banks are left holding the bag. And remember, banks left holding the bag, that's supposed to be your money that they're holding for you. But that's not the most likely outcome, because the ECB is just going to flood the market with euros as they've always done, and the government is going to enforce these draconian austerity measures on the everyday people to force them to use less energy. But just sitting back on their butts and doing absolutely nothing to solve the problem is not enough for Europe's leaders. They're actually proactively trying to make the situation worse. And if you think I'm kidding, check out this video I made about how Germany is trying to force the closure of its last 3 remaining nuclear plants, even as energy prices go vertical. Till next time, live small and dream big.